Welcome to Spill the Tea. Spill the Tea is an initiative by Scratching Collective. Scratching is a collective created by young artists for young artists to develop work at the scratchiest stages. Spill the Tea is a series of dialogue sessions looking at a range of topics that deal with arts and society. Each episode of Spill the Tea will feature a panelist of people involved in the industry. Okay, it's recording. So hi everyone, welcome to our first episode of Spill the Tea Season 2. I'm Keryna, I'm the host of Spill the Tea. This is an initiative under Scratching Collective. So today's talk will be on drama educators, and here we have 4 drama educators coming from varying backgrounds with us here. So first we have Kamil, who is the Artistic Director at Haque Center of Acting and Creativity in Singapore. Liam, who was a secondary drama educator teaching in the UK, and he is now a youth theatre director and producer. Michelle, who is a playwright and also a theatre teacher at School of the Arts Singapore. And Claudia, who is a recent graduate and now a trainee drama teacher. So hi everyone, thank you so much for joining us. I'm so excited to have you guys here. So I guess to kick this off, I would just maybe each of you can just answer this question and how you became a drama educator and how you would describe your work. Maybe Kamil, do you want to start us off?
How I became a drama teacher was through two main factors. One was when I was 7 years old, I got to watch the film Dead Poets Society, and that changed my life forever because in the watching of that film, immediately as a 7-year-old, I found my calling. Like, that's what I want to do for the rest of my life, which is teach, but specifically teach acting. I won't go into the details of that because it's a really long story. And then the other was I had a childhood mentor, and her name was Julia Gabriel. And she started her own speech and drama school that I attended when I was 7 years old. And those two factors, her being such an inspirational mentor and Robin Williams being such an inspirational teacher, it led to who I am today.
So how would you describe your work at HCAC?
So I have dedicated my entire life to helping people figure out what stories they want to tell and how can I empower them to tell those stories better. I suppose I'm most associated with the work of Lee Strasberg because that's the work that I know best and that's the work that I'm most experienced in. However, as a practitioner and also as a teacher, I find that it's more important that beyond teaching the work of Lee Strasberg, that I help people figure out what method works best for them. So essentially, I'm helping people figure out their own methodologies.
Cool, thanks for sharing. Michelle, how did you find yourself at Sota?
Very much by accident, to be honest. I went into teaching not having a very clear idea of what it entailed, probably at the very beginning, even way before Sota when I started freelancing. I think that's probably a product also of just maybe the artistic landscape in Singapore a little bit, because I knew I wanted to work in the theatre, but I guess at the time when I started, it wasn't, like Kamil mentioned earlier, a parent-approved profession. Certainly working in the arts wasn't it, right? So there was this sense of like, okay, what can I do that is stable, yet meaningful? And when I say stable, I mean in terms of like an income, right? In order to kind of fuel the art making on the side. And teaching was quite a common, I guess quite a widely available option at the time. And it wasn't until maybe midway through that I started to figure out like the more structured way of doing it, and which led, I guess, to Sota. And I think how I eventually ended up at Sota was because one of my A-level teachers who taught me theatre studies at A-level ended up there. And so she told me that a position was open. And so, yeah, so I think similarly also the teachers that I've had in a way also influenced my choices and made me see it as not just as a possibility, but as something that is, yeah, quite joyous to do. So, yeah, that's, I think, in short, the journey there.
Do you teach the lower years at Sota?
Yes, I do. So I mostly teach the lower years right now. So I see them the first year. I teach year 1s and year 2s mostly. And then I do a kind of more specific, like smaller writing class for the CP5s, the year 5s. Yeah.
Nice. Okay. So Liam, what about you?
So I, very similar to Michelle, I kind of found myself into teaching by accident, I think, in terms of my career history is quite varied. I graduated from Dartington College of Arts in 2009, having done a contemporary theatre course. And then we, with a group of friends, we decided to kind of keep trying to make work. There's not much money in that. So then kind of, different jobs in factories and call centres and things to support that. And then I returned home and a job at my old school came up. And I went for that, and I was there for a year, slowly started to pick up some drama lessons, enjoyed it, went to train to be a drama teacher for a year, and then worked in a school for nearly 4 years before, again, purely on the off chance I applied for a job at the Nuffield as the youth theatre director, not thinking I'd get it because it was very much in my ways of teaching in school. Got it, very luckily, and now I wouldn't look back. Really enjoy it. Sadly, the Nuffield went into administration due to coronavirus and no longer exists, but I was fortunate enough to get a job in another local organisation, a great organisation, and continue to make work with young people in the area, which is really cool. So yeah.
Nice. And what about you, Claudia? You also was you did your undergrad in drama, applied theatre, and education, right? So you kind of knew from pretty early on.
Yeah, so my stepmom's an art teacher, a visual arts teacher, and I'd loved growing up. So I grew up in Southeast Asia for 6 years, and I knew that I wanted to keep traveling in my life and living in different countries. And I've always loved drama and theatre from a young age. It was always something that I was good at, and people recognized that I was good at, and I was starting to think, okay, so how can I make a career out of this? And very much like Michelle, that is financially stable and all of these kind of things. And when I got to sixth form college, my teacher said to me, there's this really great course at Central, which you can learn about facilitating, you can learn about teaching, but you're also learning about just working with young people. And that's what I'd said. I'd done a few projects whilst I was in high school with working with people younger than me, and I was like, well, this is what I'm enjoying. So I was recommended to go on the course. I auditioned for the course. I didn't think I'd get in. I'm sitting there going, this is the Royal Central School of Speech and Drama. I don't belong here. I'm not an actor. And got in, and I loved the course. It's been some of the best years of my life. And just going through it, I knew that teaching was something that I wanted to go into. So at the end of my third year, I applied to become a drama teacher, and that's what I've been doing ever since. But it's been very different with COVID and learning to be a drama teacher in COVID. I think I am missing out on a couple of things during my training. But yeah, it's been a great year so far, and I'm enjoying it, and I'm still sticking with my decision.
Great. It's so nice to see a common thread amongst all of you in that you were all influenced by someone in your life, whether it was in the Poet Society or your mother, your stepmom. So I think one thing that I find interesting is that some of you are also practitioners alongside being teachers. So you're not just doing one job. So I'm interested in how you find your practice merging with your teaching. And maybe Michelle, you can start us off, because I was from Sota as well. And I know that there is a pretty standard structured curriculum that follows through the years. And so I'm curious into how you kind of make it your own and infuse your own work into your teaching.
I think, yeah, like you say, the structure that exists, though, I find, at least at the point that I started, I felt I was given quite a lot of agency, even within that structure, to figure out not just individual lesson plans were going to be, but what kind of like the broader learning objectives I wanted to establish. So that took me a little bit by surprise, because I thought I would be thrust like, okay, so these are the points that you kind of have to hit. But I actually quite enjoyed the openness after initially being a little bit freaked out by it. It's like, this is too much responsibility. But it was good, because then it allowed, I suppose, I found that the openness allowed me to just craft things in a way that I felt suited the kids at the time, I suppose, and to get to where they wanted to get. How, I suppose, your question, how it merges with practice, because I'm also not primarily trained as a performer, right? And I happen to be put, I think because of my background, I primarily teach a class in the lower years called Theory and Context, which is very boring for a year one student who wants to come into an art school and, act and everything. So I think my challenge is, how do I make the theoretical parts fun, right? How do I make you find joy and excitement in text analysis, which to me is such a foundational part of doing theatre. Yeah, so I suppose that's one big area in which my own training and my own practice, and personally, like my own obsession with words and love for it. I suppose that's how it bleeds into the teaching that I try to do. Yeah.
And what about you, Liam? Because I mean, now you mentioned that you're a youth theatre director and producer. So when you're teaching, how do you find certain practices that to seep into structured learning curriculums and environments?
It's a lot of responding to what the people you're working with are wanting to do, and being able to adapt that over the course of time. I think there's two big differences. If you're working in, as I was, state education for effectively 6 years with the training involved as well, you are dictated what it is that you must teach in order to ensure that a student by the time of a certain age passes an exam, which is now predominantly written work in a creative physical art form, which might be one of the main reasons why I decided to leave. And so you're having to prepare them for that. And so although you have a bit of freedom as to how you get them to that point, you don't really get to respond to what they're interested in or what they want to do too much. However, working for a theatre organisation, as I have done for a number of organisations in the area, there is this opportunity to take risks that you just won't be able to take risks anywhere else. And the risks aren't me bringing material, which I think is going to maybe not be the taste of everyone, but me kind of just going, actually, we're going to wait and listen to what the young people that I'm working with want to do and where they're at, and kind of assess them loosely on what their understanding is, and then we'll adapt the work to them. So the main difference between education in schools and this theatre education in the organisation is, in the school you have to work towards something and you have to teach these things. What I like to do in the organisation is go, well, every single session will be different for every kind of age group, and every year will be different, because I don't know who I'm going to have in the room at that particular time. And that's quite a nice thing to be able to do. It's terrifying in the sense that you might get it wrong, but actually there's a lot more, you're allowed to kind of get things wrong a lot more when you're not working in a school, because there isn't this kind of added time pressure, and it's not like the pressure kettle is just not there. You can kind of be a bit more free, I find.
Yeah, your organization sounds a little bit like HCAC, which Kamil does. So do you have anything to add on how, I mean, because you guys do acting workshops for adults and for children as well, and that's kind of outside of any assessment or grading structures. So how do you find, do you still see that kind of tension between your own practice and having to teach, or does it kind of merge quite nicely?
I think as having grown up in Singapore, the first 20 odd years of my life, as a practitioner, as an actor, I had no technique whatsoever. Technique wasn't taught to me. It was learned through performance, learned through rehearsals. The aim was always to put on a show of some sort. And so my technique at that point was essentially more skewed towards physical, verbal, and intellectual gymnastics of sorts. Be the loudest, smiliest person in the room who speaks the best, and that'll get you through the door most times. It was only when I went to LA and I realized, I've got to also build inner life. And what does that actually mean? How do I build that? And then I then learned how to figure out the balance between physical, intellectual, and then quote unquote spiritual, which I sort of consider the emotional, psychological, just inner life of the being, of the character. And so as a teacher now, it's important for me to emphasize the importance of all three areas to the people that I work with. How do you physically create a person? How do you intellectually sort of understand the way, what they think about and how they think about things? And then the spiritual, the emotional, the psychology, the whys of things, the ability to personalize things, the ability to advocate for things. Because in the work that I teach at the studio, not everyone wants to be an actor. Many of them want to pick up skills and tools from the world of the arts and then go back to their lives as whatever, Forbes 500 leaders or whatever it is. And I still think that whether one is in the corporate world or whether one is on TV, film, or theater, in essence, you're still telling a story. And so how can you physically advocate for that story? How can you intellectually advocate for this story? How can you personalize and advocate so that we understand the why behind everything that you do? Because it just makes you more authentic a storyteller. So it's constantly adapting these three areas for how people work. And in the last, say, 2 years or so, I've been also trying to figure out how do I help people practice self-care and self-soothing so that they can turn off as quickly as they can turn on.
Nice. And what about you, Claudia? Because I mean, you do work in a school, so there are certain structures there. So do you find that there's some wiggle room to have agency in your teaching?
Yeah, so Key Stage 3, which is year 7 to 9, we don't have a curriculum for. So we have a lot of leeway in terms of what we can teach. And you know, that's kind of been a blessing with COVID, because if I had to be teaching them certain things, they're classroom bound at the moment, so they are sat behind desks, all of my Key Stage 3 lessons. So I wouldn't have probably been able to meet you know, the expectations of the curriculum had it have been the fact that if we did have a curriculum. So I think it's quite nice in the UK that we don't have that, but like Liam rightfully said, there's certain things that we are expected to teach them by the time that they get to the age where they're taking the GCSE, so that they're prepared and so that we're not having to rush that course. And I think it's really interesting because there's some schools that teach the whole GCSE in 1 year as opposed to 2 years. So that's really interesting, and as well in terms of you'll be doing, I feel a lot, I think you're giving yourself a lot more of a structure in those lower years, because you know by the time that they get to that 1 year, there's a lot to fit in. So it's nice because I can kind of change my schemes of work and I can adapt it. But you know, I had a student who was a year 13 student, and they're 18, and they said, I really want to be an actor, and this year I want to audition for drama school. And I think that's great. And I would always encourage students to go and have that experience. And then they got back to me a couple of months later to say, hey, miss, I've been offered a foundation place. I haven't got into any of my drama schools and their degree courses, but I have been offered a foundation course at a drama school. And I was like, I think you should take it. And there's this kind of weird attitude in the UK that foundations are kind of not as, you know, positively looked upon, and that, you know, then they're not as good. I don't know. I don't really think that's correct, because I said to my student, I was like, I can't teach you to be an actor in your A-level course. It's just the curriculum isn't set up to do that. It's to discover theatre, to learn how to talk about theatre, to do a little bit of acting and devising. But the things that I feel you need, even to just start on the acting course, I can't teach you those things. And a foundation course is a really great way to actually get into the industry and just teach you certain things that you need as an actor, even to just train at a drama school. So I do think the UK really needs to possibly look at the curriculum that it has in place, because it is very written work based, and I understand they made that change to make it more accessible to other students. But I do feel that students that have taken on, you know, they want to do a practical course are let down in a certain way. And there's lots of things that I feel I can't teach them, because I have to focus on the fact that the course is 60% written work, and that's where the bulk of their qualification is coming from.
I think it's really interesting you're touching on some institutional constraints, because I think what we're kind of talking about here points to a wider discussion on meritocracy and capitalism, and how certain forms of learning are prioritized, and also how we ascribe value to certain things. So maybe others here can also share about certain institutional constraints that you find in your work. and whether you see value in some of these systems, and what are some ways in which you also try to subvert these meritocratic systems. I think Kamil, with your work at HCAC, and I really like the double life that you were talking about, with how a lot of your actors and participants in the acting workshops come from corporate lives as well. And so you provide that kind of space for them outside of that world.
So I think one of the things that I have unfortunately discovered over time is the people that are drawn to the arts that are, at least in Singapore, but I dare say in other parts of the world, the people that are drawn to the arts that are able to make a sustainable living in the arts, more often than not, come from some level of means. It allows you that bandwidth to sort of like mess up and fail and try things that you would not otherwise, because I think when you come from some means, then you have more optionality for subjects that you want to focus on, versus I'm just trying to do the thing so I can survive and put food on the table. But above and beyond that, I think whether one is working to put food on the table or whether one is working to find themselves, what I do love about the arts is that it is, there are certain aspects of it that sort of are for anyone and everyone. I know that within larger institutions that are governed by ministries and things of that nature, there is that pass-fail mechanism. There is I have to grade you so I know whether I can push you on to the next level or not. And having been a part of those organizations, I can see the value of that, but I can also see, based on what Claudia was saying, what Liam was saying, what Michelle was saying, that at the end of the day, I mean, we hear all the time, art is subjective. And, for all the certificates and diplomas and degrees I have in my back pocket, I've never once attended an audition where someone has said, I would hire you, but you didn't bring your diploma with you, or you didn't go to Yale, so I guess I can't give you that role. It's either you can do it or you can't. So I don't necessarily believe in the pass-fail mechanism. I don't know if I'm necessarily answering a question. What I do know is that I don't agree with the pass-fail mechanism, and so as much as possible, I try and make it applicable and open to anyone and everyone who wants to take workshops at my studio. And as best as possible, we offer scholarships and we offer payment plans to people, because I want it to be available to everyone, not just people who want to spend 4 years or 5 years in some sort of institution, because not everyone has that bandwidth or that ability to dedicate that amount of time.
Yeah, there's definitely a class dimension to this. Thank you for pointing that out. Yeah, maybe Michelle, because in Sota and in school, I'm in School of the Arts, for people who are listening who don't know, the curriculum kind of leads to the IB diploma in the final 2 years, and in some ways there might be some constraints there in terms of like preparation for students to reach a certain skill set by the time they get to the ages of 17 or 18 to take the exam. So how do you find, like balancing grading systems with your own value system?
I think the tensions that you are mentioning, right, that we've just been discussing here already, I don't even think you need to wait until the IB years to feel that. I think in and of itself, it's already a very strange place to be, to teach an art form like theatre within a very rigid, wider school system, right? There's something already inherently like conflicting about that. And I think I speak personally for myself, but I think for several of my colleagues in the theatre department also, we've had various discussions about this. It's a constant navigation of like, we want to encourage this experimentation. We want to encourage, this safety of failure, and not to view it as something that, then my life is over, if I don't get a certain grade or I don't pass. But it's so hard to escape. We also can't be like overly idealistic and raising students' expectations to a place where we sell them the lie and say, well, your grades don't matter, because unfortunately in this reality they do, right? So it's this back and forth. And I find personally for me, how I try to square it with, I don't know, I think in recent times, I find then education becomes almost like what I'm teaching then is not simply the subject matter, right? But I'm teaching also, it becomes an act of resistance, really. It becomes, right? And theater for me, so much of theater is about that, because so much of it leads you to question things, or leads you to, you're not just learning about what you don't know, but then you're also hopefully questioning what you do know. And all these things that we are hoping that students will question are precisely these things that you've raised. Like, the system that you're in, is it necessarily the best thing? Is this the only way that I can go about creating something? You know, when I go through a devising process, what are the things I value? So how do I navigate everything? So I don't think it's something that has very easy answers. I think it requires such a huge paradigm shift on a societal level about what we value, what we feel is the end point of education, and all these things. In a country like this, we find ourselves, I think, at a point where we don't even have the vocabulary to talk about these things, because for so long we've decided not to talk about it, right? For so long we've had very clear priorities of what was important, which is none of these soft things, quote unquote, right? We just wanted to kind of survive and prosper, and we've gotten there, and now we're a little bit like, what do we do with ourselves? Yeah, so then theater is here. It's always been there. It's always been trying to say something and trying to fill this gap. But I think for people who are on the outside of it, it also it seems a little bit scary, because these are difficult conversations to have if we are going to hold the mirror up to ourselves and say, is there something innately problematic with what we sell as meritocracy? Can of worms, right? And everybody's going to figure out. So yeah, I feel like it's starting to happen, and I feel like that's why working with young people sometimes gives me that kind of hope that it might happen. But I think it's also tempered with this dose of reality, in that it might not happen in this lifetime. It might be very, very slow going. We might be in this in-between place for a while.
Yeah, there's definitely this wider cultural attitude that shapes students' learnings in the classroom itself. That's not something you can really control. But I definitely do see how my theater education in Sota has completely changed me and my worldview. So you're right. It is an act of resistance. It's nice. It's a nice way to think about it. Liam, do you have anything to add in terms of your own experience?
I wanted to go back to a point that Claudia made earlier on about the foundation degree and the lack of kind of appreciation of that in the UK. And just any sort of acting experience or training which is outside of the traditional big drama schools. We put such a big emphasis on having attended Central, RADA, or Guildhall, or Bristol Vic Theatre School, and there is such an unhealthy, in my opinion, obsession with young people trying to get into these establishments when they have very small numbers of places, and they have thousands of people every single year trying to get into them. It's not to disrespect or disregard the training in which they will get there, but there's this thing of, if you don't get into those ones, then you're not really going to make it, and you're not going to be a success in the field of acting primarily. But then if you look at kind of the people that we're seeing today on TV, and we're seeing who are doing really good roles, like if you take, for example, Vicky McClure, at the moment she's in probably the biggest BBC drama, British drama, which is probably has been global, with Line of Duty. It's now in its 5th series, and she is the main female performer in that show. She didn't go to drama school. She was picked up for being in a Shane Meadows film, which is a British working class director who looked for talent in the local community and kind of gave people an opportunity and a chance. And she took that opportunity. She was successful, got into Room for Romeo Brass. Didn't then, from what I can briefly remember, didn't get much off the back of that, but then got into This Is England, and This Is England just catapulted her career and enabled her to then get other things. So she didn't even attend a traditional drama school, but yet she's the most successful female British actor at the moment in the UK. And then you compare that with Claire Foy, who is probably the most known female British actor of the last 5 years for having played the Queen in The Crown for the first 2 seasons. she did a foundation course at Oxford School of Drama. We don't in this country really, excuse me, we don't really respect Oxford School of Drama because it's not a drama school of note. Yet the best British female actor to then play the Queen for 2 series went there and did a foundation course, and she comes from, she doesn't come from a wealthy background. And so we have this unhealthy obsession of going, well, if you didn't go to Cambridge and performed in the Footlights, or if you didn't go to one of the renowned drama schools, you're not going to make it, which is not true. And the problem is we don't celebrate that enough. We focus too much on those who did go the traditional route. And in reality, the people that go those traditional routes, we're just churning out the same talent all the time. We're not actually getting anything which is of particular interest to the wider receiving audience. So that was the first thing. The second thing I wanted to say was just really quickly is that education really is what somebody wants to get out of it. The problem is in the United Kingdom, and I know that other countries kind of follow the similar route, our education system is garnered by whatever the government in power want people to be getting out of it. And so this whole point of Michael Gove came in as education secretary in the early 2010s, and he decided to kind of bring about a change to the education system in what his party, in his opinion, was the right thing to do. And it may be, but somebody will then come in again in a couple of years when the Conservatives possibly, I say hopefully, when the Conservatives lose power and Labour Party or somebody else comes in, and it would be another change. And so the problem with that is that there's a constant moving of goalposts in state education. And so when we think about drama education and where children first get their taste of it, it is in school, because it's given to them and they have to attend school. If they want to then broaden that, they have to make a decision to go elsewhere and to get a further education. My first introduction to it was in local pantomime in like really small village hall, community centre, with a bunch of older blokes who wrote it, were the pantomime dame. And that was the best education of theatre I've had before I then went to probably sixth form and then on to university and did stuff outside of school. I loved my drama teacher at school, brilliant, but they were constricted by what the government were telling them to do, and it will always be that way.
Yeah, there's definitely this like traditional trajectory that people think that they have to follow, and I find that it's definitely happens here in Singapore as well, of course it does. Yeah. Claudia, do you have anything to add in response?
Yeah, I mean, again, going off what Liam said about like just even other drama schools that aren't in London seem to just get looked down upon. Again, I think I definitely think that's part of the north-south divide that we have in this country, and it's ridiculous that an institution like LIPA is looked down upon when they are provide. And the crazy thing is as well is that similarly, universities that teach drama courses also very much get looked down upon, when in actual fact a lot of the people that have been teaching at drama schools then go on to teach at these other institutions. And I go, so just because they're not now under this big umbrella that's so highly looked upon in our society, that all, I just think it's kind of mad, and I think plays a lot into classism that we have in this country. And then the other thing that I was going to pick up upon, it's definitely that a teacher can only provide so much in a classroom and has a responsibility to their school to try and get students, the highest grades possible. So very much like Liam, I was going to a lot of outside drama sort of activities just to try and get my experience. But I also then think drama teachers, and a lot of them go on to have families and have other responsibilities in their life. And if you're not near London, what theatre are you seeing? And if you've got other responsibilities, how much theatre can you then, do you have time to go and see? I'm really fortunate, I'm only 22, so outside of COVID, I'd lived in London, I'd gone and seen as much theatre as possible, and I'm now bringing that to my teaching. But I do, and I really pride myself on that, and my colleagues in my school are really like, that's amazing, because you're talking about things that have happened in the past 2 years, and they just don't have that knowledge because life gets in the way. So I wonder if there's a way in the UK of trying to ensure that drama teachers have got as much relevant subject knowledge, and it's part of our teaching standards that we have in the UK. But I think because of other life responsibilities, they haven't got the time to be going to see all the big shows, and also going up to the Ed Fringe and all of these kind of things. So where does their subject knowledge sort of start and stop? And I think then again, it's this whole classes thing of what shows then tour and come to their local theatres where they teach, and what are they, what do they have access to? I think again, it also goes for the same thing as students. At my drama school, they always said to me, go and see as much work as you can, because that's where your inspiration will come. And I think it works for the same as teachers.
Yeah, for sure. Those are really important points. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, I remember being told the same thing, like go for as many shows as possible, but it can be difficult when a lot of shows are like $40. Just this crazy price for some people. So we've been talking a lot about external constraints to teaching. And I think to end this discussion off, one thing I've been curious about is, because I mean that as educators, you have the agency to create a particular classroom environment, in a safe and inclusive environment. So maybe we can end off by sharing how we do that and how a safe and inclusive classroom environment can be created.
If it's okay to go first, it always, for me, again, there's the difference between a school environment and the organisation environment I now work in is this this freedom of being able to fully understand the young people that you're working with. And I mean this with the greatest respect to school education. In school education, we are in the United Kingdom, as Claudia said, there are professional standards that you have to abide by. There are teaching standards that you have to make sure your lessons hit. But there's also this understanding of child welfare and safeguarding and everything that kind of comes with it. And I think that I'm a 34-year-old white straight man. And so my lived experience is actually very different to a lot of the young people that I work with. There's a lot of young people who I've worked with recently who come from different ethnic backgrounds, come from different social class backgrounds, but also are going through a lot of life decisions. And so when it comes down to making that kind of safe environment, it's about understanding where the people that you're working with are currently at in terms of their gender journey or their identity journey in general. When I was working in school, as soon as that came onto the radar, there is a safeguarding procedure you have to kind of go through. You have to then understand who to report those concerns. I say concerns loosely, those concerns to, and you have to make notes of it. And it then becomes difficult to just allow that in mixture with everything else, allow that kind of person to just be who they want to be without everything else in place. When working in an organization, we still have those same child protection and safeguarding policies in place, but there's this opportunity to allow them to be who they want to be a lot more. And for me, that's the crucial thing first and foremost. You create that environment where everybody can be who they want to be. They can present as who they want to present as. And as long as it's safe for them and safe for everybody else that you're with, that's the most important thing. And then from there, we can then explore stories and characters and situations which they want to work with. And so we have this very different experience in these theatre organisation workshops I'm probably working on compared to how it was when I was working in schools, because of all the other things that get in the way. But yeah, the key thing is just taking time for me to understand them, to be open to listen to their experiences and how much they want to share, and then ensure that everything is in place to make sure that those 15-20 people are all supporting each other and moving in the same direction.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for sharing. Anyone have any final concluding thoughts about this?
I think, like, in terms of coming from a drama education background, I think it's also about how are you selecting your resources? And like I say, I can change my scheme of work up a lot of the time. So, am I keeping my plays relevant? Are my children seeing themselves represented in that classroom? Because I think that then, if you're studying a play about someone from a different background and you and a different lived experience, it opens up those conversations. And I think those conversations are kind of some of the most important educational work that I do, talking about, well, why do some people have a different gender identity to the one that they were assigned at birth? Talking about why are people why do people have prejudiced attitudes in this country? Where does that come from? And I think, drama is such an important opportunity to open up those conversations with our young people. I live in quite a predominantly white area. The school that I teach at, isn't predominantly white. It's very, very culturally diverse. And I think it's a really important thing that the students are seeing themselves represented and celebrated in that classroom. So for me, that's a huge part of safe space, and having those conversations, particularly at starting that from a young age.
Yeah, Michelle, were you about to say something?
Oh, I was going to say, yeah. I mean, in addition to the things that Liam and Claudia have raised as well, there's a sense of, on one level, yes, we have these conversations, the kids feel safe enough, I think, to have these conversations. But another thing that I found particularly challenging and tried to do in the classroom is also when they bring in something that is deeply personal to them, to their work. And I think part of the education process or this process of creating that safe space is also teaching how to insert a kind of distance also between something that is deeply personal and when you put it out there as a piece, when you craft it as a piece of theater, I think. Because at this age, everything, I think you feel all the feelings and you start from there, and it's great. But I think there sometimes can be a conflation of what is vulnerability versus and it's a way of managing that vulnerability, right? And I think educators have this responsibility to also protect students getting to a place where they might be able to handle it, but then also protecting them from, let's say, how the work is being received, for instance, or something that they put out there. So there's that additional layer. I find that to work with can be challenging too.
Yeah, that's an important point. Kamil, do you have anything to add before we end?
Yeah, I think the idea of emphasizing the need to sort of create that distance, Michelle, that's a really good point. The idea of like just practicing self-care, going into it and practicing self-care, coming out of it as well, strategies to de-roll from things just so that they don't take their work home with them, as well as another thing. But I in addition, I think regardless of whether they're kids, teenagers, adults, is to be able to activate in them this desire that makes their heart sing, because life is a way of just sort of like crushing your soul a little bit and telling you that you've got to fit in this box, and if you don't fit in that box, well, then you're no good to society. And I think if we can find a way to restoke some of that fire and make their hearts sing a little bit, just so that the reality is that not everyone who comes out of these programs is going to be an actor, director, writer. That's just statistically just not possible. And so if we can't make all of them actors, writers, directors, or performers of some sort, then can we make them active audience members for the people who decide to go down those paths, and teach them to understand and appreciate what they see on film and on TV and on stages. And even if they desire to never watch or participate in the arts for whatever reason, at least helping them understand how to be better human beings. I think it was, may have been Michelle, who was talking about the soft skills earlier on. And I think it's the soft skills, the essential skills of what it means to be a human, especially in this crazy world that we're living in now, with politics being the way it is, the environment being the way it is, et cetera, is how do we create a safe and inclusive just world where humans actually care just a little bit more for each other and the stories that each other have. I think the arts has that key, and I think it's our sort of responsibility, whether it's kids, teachers, teens, adults, to remind people that they have the ability to do it for themselves.
Yeah, Yeah, thank you so much. That's a great way to end this conversation. And I want to bring up something Michelle said just now about theater as an act of resistance. I know we've been talking a lot about like the tension between structure and agency, but seeing theater as a form of play and even an exercise of self-cultivation, it's a great way to think of how we can continue to subvert certain things that seek to constrain us. So thank you all so much for joining me today. I think this has been great, and I'm left with a lot more topics to continue further and to talk about and conversations to open. So thank you guys so much. It was really great having you here. Thank you. Bye. See you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Look out for a summary pack that will be up on our Instagram, and continue these conversations into your own lives. Make sure to follow us on our socials to find out what else we have been up to, and do look out for our other episodes.